Welcome to another Modern Mind Ancient Book where we're going back to move forward. We're finding a love for the law, the prophets, and the writings. My name is Roger. I'll be your host. We've got Chip with us today. Chip, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Howdy. Good to be with you.
That's fantastic. We are on to the second episode of The Fate of the Apostles. This book was actually written by the son of Josh McDowell. Is that correct?
Yeah, Sean McDowell is the author that we're leaning on heavily.
Yeah, and you know, it's not the only source, but it's the major source. We've got 14 individuals that we're going to talk about, and all of them are listed in that particular book. So we've done the first 7, and if you go to the show notes of the first 7, you can look and find not only the McDowell book, but other resources. If this is something that's interesting to you, also look in the show notes here. You can find more resources. Today, we're going to talk about the last 7, and all of these, unlike the first 7, are actually apostles.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we can explain a little bit about the book. The gentleman gave us basically all the stories that he could find.
Right, and basically rated them from most likely to least evidence for, and in descending order. Some of these guys, like we covered in the last episode, we are pretty sure that the historical record is verified and very accurate. And as we make our way into these 7, it becomes a little bit more church tradition, later research, or I should say later evidence. Some of it's sketchy. What we do know is they went out to spread the gospel, and they were martyred somewhere. That's what we know for sure.
Yeah, they went out and they talked about this risen Jesus, right? So that's not the content that's in front of us, but that's the content that drove them to go out, speak, act, and do in the name of God, in the name of the Son, the one who rose from the dead and overcame death and the grave, right?
Yep.
So, there's an additional 7 that we're going to talk about today. And actually, these are the more well-known ones compared to what we had talked about last time. There were a few in the last one that weren't actually apostles that we had talked about, or right, that we were more aware of, kind of thing. So the first one that we're going to talk about, and all 7 of these are kind of lower confidence, right? They're stories, and we assume that they tell us something, but we don't know if they tell us.
Some of them have fantastic church traditions that are established in their name, the tradition is strong. The evidence for the tradition is not quite as strong, if that makes any sense.
But definitely worth talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the first gentleman we're going to talk about is the patron saint of Armenia. Is that correct?
Well, he's not the patron saint, but in my opinion, he should be. This is my second favorite apostle, and because John moved up the list. This is Nathaniel, or Bartholomew, or Bartholomew, Saint Bartholomew. And so his tradition is he headed out to the east from basically out of Roman territory into Parthian territory, may have traveled as far as India with Thomas, came back at some point, and what we do know for certain is he was in Armenia, and Armenia is the first of all of the Christian nations. It's the first sovereign state, if there is such a thing in this period, that converted to Christianity. Basically his story, and we're not really 100% certain that his martyrdom account is exactly right, but he evangelized the prince and princess of the ruling dynasty of Armenia, and apparently some of the other royal family, or the whatever you want to call them, the nobility, decided that they didn't want to do it, and so they essentially flayed him alive.
Cut all his skin off.
So this is the thing about Nathaniel Slant Bartholomew is he literally recognized Jesus as the King of Israel based on Jesus telling him what he saw under the fig tree. I really identify with this man. He's the patron saint of leather workers, and which is really kind of gruesome when you think about it. There's several monasteries in Georgia and Armenia that are named for him, and allegedly he was flayed alive. That's sort of a late Christian tradition, about the 5th, 6th century.
Okay.
Armenia came to faith before then. So that's the story on Bartholomew.
This is the apostle that Jesus saw under the tree, who was brought to Jesus, and he said,
Here is an Israelite in which there is no guile.
Yeah.
A true Israelite. And he also told Nathanael, I call him Nathanael, Bartholomew is sort of a later tradition, and there's some dispute in the gospel. So one gospel calls him Nathanael, another one calls him Bartholomew. It's the same person, and that's pretty clear. But he said that he would, Jesus basically told him, you'll see the angels descending and ascending upon the Son of Man, much like Jacob did, which is pretty amazing. Nathanael basically saw and believed, and you don't hear a whole lot about him in the Gospels other than a mention of his name.
I really like that story because Jesus was there with him, but he wasn't there.
Right. He saw everything he did under the fig tree.
Wow.
Whatever that is. And, that was sort of my come to faith moment when I was having it wasn't a crisis of faith. I didn't have faith, and I was literally underneath a fig tree at my farm, wrestling with God on a hot afternoon last year. Same kind of thing. So I identify strongly with Nathanael.
Yeah, it's in the motif of the trees, which we see in the Bible a lot. If you listen to some of the ones that are already got like Judges and whatnot, you're going to hear us talk about this a little bit. But the fig tree is a particular tree. First of all, it's a sweet tree. It's a producing tree. It's something that means a lot to the people. It's a staple food, right?
Yeah, it smells good too. It's a great tree.
It's a beautiful tree.
Sure is.
And produces good fruit. And here Nathanael is underneath of it, associated with a tree, right? So we're going back to the garden motif and all this stuff. So I just love it. I love that Jesus actually proclaimed his divinity in this very moment.
Yeah.
While he was in a body. This is hard for theologians, that.
Right. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is the only person who could have seen Nathanael under the fig tree was God. Nathanael was talking to God.
He was talking to God. That's right.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then later, Philip brings Nathanael with come and see, which is another thing. That's what I want to tell the world. Come and see.
Yeah, Nathanael the skeptic.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. And then he went to be skinned alive. And then a gruesome tradition followed that he is the patron saint of leather workers.
Yeah, and tanners and so forth. Yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that I pretty much reject.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Nathanael, amazing story. Died where at? Armenia or India?
Yeah, we're pretty sure he died in Armenia. And McDowell posits that that's the most likely. But this is all low confidence stuff because the evidence for this is late church tradition. By late, we mean after the schism between the Way and the Jewish faith.
Yeah, a long time after
right,
that.
and so, if you can imagine the time, this is chaos. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. Yes, churches became states and political powers and stuff. Okay, so the next one is Matthew.
Yep.
Yeah, the tax collector.
Yeah, the tax collector.
So Ethiopia or Persia, right? He also went to the east.
Yep.
We don't know the dates either for either one of those. And he was killed with a blade in some way, stabbed or beheaded.
Maybe beheaded, yep.
Yep.
And I personally lean towards Ethiopia rather than out to the east in Persia, but that's
it's two totally different locations.
Yeah, it's like and he probably went to both. Like Thomas, for example, when he went to India, he didn't go alone. He went the farthest, but he didn't go alone through Persia. If you can think of the politics back then, Rome and Parthia, which was basically Persia, were mortal enemies, and the Romans never could beat the Parthians. The Parthians actually destroyed Crassus back in the triumvirate period as the empire was coming into being, which is a story for another time.
It's that kind of Babylonian spirit thing. It's always going to be a power broker. It's always been an alluring place for the bad seed, the seed that is not of God, right?
Right, and there was also a huge Jewish diaspora in Babylon, which is at the time of the spreading of the gospel at this period was, essentially Parthian.
Not all Jewish people returned to Israel.
Yep.
Many, many, many didn't.
Yep.
In fact, the northern 10 tribes, very few did.
Yep.
From the Assyrian captivity. So Matthew, murdered just the same, because his confidence in Jesus raising from the dead. I mean, a listener, you can't. There's a couple things that are true. Okay, you could be a skeptic. You could not care about Jesus. You could not care about religion. But what you can't do is look at this and say, it appears that they were deceived. Because
of all the eyewitnesses.
Yeah, and not only that, their insistence upon going all the way.
Right. Well, like I think I said in the last episode, one of the things that's very convincing for all of the apostles, well, we talked about John. John didn't actually get martyred. He lived to be a ripe old age of whatever that would have been. But the convincing thing about the apologetics of this is these men all went out, spread the gospel outside of the vision of other people. In other words, many of these men died alone in a faraway place. And who does that for a lie?
Well, it speaks. See, this is the amazing thing to me about Christianity in general, because it's first of all it's a form of Judaism. Jesus practiced a form of Judaism. To me, I call it the purified Judaism of Jesus, because it was going back to what God originally gave after it was lost in the various captivities. And, Israel became like this warrior nation, which they were never meant to be. They were always supposed to be a humble people who knew their broken past and gave God life and hope to the world, right? Yep. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He came and he did that, but in such an astonishing way, because, let's take first century Nathaniel, a Jewish man with no guile, right? Or Matthew, a tax collector who betrayed his people. Neither one of these people had ventured outside of Israel at this point, nor would they ever.
Right.
Because, maybe Matthew would have, but he would have went to Rome or something,
I don't
right?
think so. My understanding is that's probably not the case. I think he was in Judea the whole time.
If he did, it would have been to Rome, right?
Yeah.
To receive some honor or whatever,
right? Yep.
But these guys went well beyond their comfort zones, because going to the area of Persia or Babylon, I mean, this is bad juju for a Jewish person.
And from a concept of this period of time for a Jewish person that's coming out of Judea, they literally went to the ends of the earth.
Yeah, to talk about Jesus, the one who rose from the dead.
Yep.
And overcame the curse in the garden, right? Like, the whole biblical narrative is tied up in this one true Jewish man, the one who fulfilled the Mosaic covenant and gave us the new covenant. I mean, it's all just a big deal. And these guys really exemplify the exemplary nature of what Jesus did. He does have greater ability than Genghis Khan.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, he's God walking in his creation, in my opinion.
In an overcoming evil. Yep. I mean, how many people have changed their ways because Jesus rose from the dead?
Well, I'm one of them.
That's right.
I've done a complete U-turn. I'm still working on myself, but actually Jesus is working on me.
And we've not quite resisted to the state of Matthew, right?
No. But I mean, one of the things that interests me again about all these guys is, who would die for a lie? Well, a man who is deceived. But these people, if they knew it was a lie, these people walked with Jesus. They saw Jesus resurrected. And you don't go out and if that's not true, you don't go out and die for something. They would have been in a position to know whether they were lying or not. And very few liars die for what they know is a lie. These men, they knew it was the truth.
The official narrative, the official Jewish narrative is that, the body was stolen or something. Right. And, but I mean, this story doesn't say that. What this says is that these guys broke all of what would be their normal ways, because they saw, believed, and knew something that was bigger than even their own lives.
Yep.
Pretty phenomenal. Next one is James, the son of Alphaeus.
Or James what do they call him? James the Lesser?
James the Lesser.
Wouldn't that be a terrible moniker? or as some people say, Little James, as opposed to from, James Zebedee.
So, it says he was killed in Jerusalem by stoning or clubbing.
So, an interesting thing to me is one of the arguments about stoning, that would be a traditional Jewish penalty for blasphemy, right?
Right.
So that seems more likely to me than clubbing. Clubbing, to me, seems like you're walking down an alley and, they've sent some guys out to take you out, and so they club you to death. But stoning implies that you were literally accused of blasphemy, probably.
We saw it with Stephen. And, it's in the
yeah,
Torah.
It's a traditional Jewish traditional Jewish punishment.
It's a way to solve a problem when it comes to what is seen as righteousness.
Well, yeah, and it
right?
goes all the way back to the Pentateuch, to the Torah. I mean, think about was it Achan who was killed, who was stoned? Yeah, back because after Jericho, because he took the ingots and all,
the gold mantle or the mantle and the yeah. So again, there you go, Babylon, right? So it was the luring nature of this treasure that caused him to sin and break. But in this narrative, the disciples are going to there to bring them back.
Yep.
Yeah. So Jesus is just the epitome of everything good. Simon the Zealot, location Persia or Syria. So he went to Mesopotamia, right? That's what that says.
Right. Yep.
All these guys went to Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sawed in half or crucified. Don't know which one.
Right. And all this is low confidence too. And I'm not really aware. Simon the Zealot is a person who, is just starting my walk. Simon the Zealot's one that I would not pick out of a lineup had I not read the New Testament. I'd never even heard of the guy. I knew who the Zealots were, didn't know that one of them was a disciple.
He's one of my favorites because of the transformation. So, at the fall of the temple in AD 70 and prior, I think it started really the war in about 64 or so. It started as a kind of populist movement, but a political movement where
it was
the temple authorities kind of thing, But when the Zealots became active and took hold, it really, really got heated.
Yeah, and they were killing not only were they killing Romans, they were killing Greeks and foreigners and also
their own people.
Yep. That weren't religious enough for them.
The Zealots were all about the purification of the people because it's all about this Messiah figure, but it's the definition of that Messiah. So is the Messiah a warrior king? Yes.
Yes.
Is the Messiah a suffering servant? Yes. But for the Zealots, the suffering part was over, and it was time for Israel to rise up and take their place. So in prevailing theology, especially during this time in the first century, Israel is seen as the suffering servant.
Right.
The embodiment is the
nation. The national embodiment.
The national version of this theology, right? So the Zealots took it upon themselves to be a national image of the conquering king. And they were a very ruthless group and very warlike. Again, Israel is a warrior nation.
Right. I just, I'm kind of reminded of the Maccabees a little bit about what a horrible thing it is when you're committing fratricide. And so you wonder, I mean, I know that they thought they were doing right. I can see some parallels to 21st century terrorism.
Yeah.
I may be wrong about that, but it strikes me that way. But, when you have to wonder how much compromise do you make with the adversary when you're harnessing your own violence to bring in what you believe is a godly, divine, an honest-to-goodness God of Israel type thing. You really wonder, God probably wasn't even in the cards there.
Well, here's the tension in the Bible, right? So you have Moses who goes and calls the people and tells them, you're going to take the land, right? Yep. Basically, they became a warrior nation,
right,
with those commands, right? So, they get to the edge of the wilderness. Moses can't go in, but Joshua takes them in, and the very first thing that they do is begin conquest. I mean, they had conquest under Moses too, but under Joshua, they had, pretty significant conquest. And all 12 tribes were involved in it, and that really became their identity. And you could argue that it was God who caused that, right? Because the command is to go and take the land and destroy everything in it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where I think theology gets missed, right? Because there was a second part to this. If you do it, you'll be blessed. If you don't, you'll be cursed. And both Moses and Joshua said, but you will not do it.
Uh-huh.
So the command is to go be a warrior nation, but then at the same time, you're not actually going to do this.
Right.
And you're going to continue to suffer, and it's going to be bad for you, and you're going to be removed from the land. So this is the way my theology writes that story. I say, yep, the Zealots were right, but they're at the wrong time.
Right.
And it's not the journey of man, it's not the responsibility of man to enact this sort of righteous justice. I mean, Jesus told us that, right? Should we go? His servants asked him, who did this? The parable of the wheat and the tares? Who did this? He said it was an enemy. They say, should we go and root it out? And they say, no, because you root up some of the good with it.
Exactly.
Right? Which is exactly what happened in Maccabees and in this revolt during the late 60s, you know?
Yep.
So this is the way I see it. God spoke into a dark world that needed to get to the point of Jesus. So he spoke into a world that was completely incapable of doing what he was asking, but he had to ask it because Jesus had to be the image of the fulfillment of it.
Right.
And so it was always prophetic, it was always future looking, and Israel's true identity is not as a warrior nation, but as the bride of God.
Right.
The ones who were created to be his.
In a covenantal relationship.
And that covenantal relationship was offered as the way of the world so that they could learn that that is not the right way.
Mm-hmm.
That it has to be God's way. So basically, they're the image, right? Like the Galatians tells us, that it teaches us, leads us to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Because when men take righteousness upon themselves, they incur blood guilt.
It quickly becomes self-righteousness.
Yeah, and very violent and nasty.
Yep.
Right?
And these guys were no friends to the way. I mean, they saw them as heretics and some of the worst. They murdered an awful lot of people following Jesus.
Yeah,
I mean, new, relatively new first and second generation.
It's Cain and Abel. It's the wrong tree.
Yep.
Right. But our job is not to judge. Our job is to believe that Jesus is capable of judging, and to actually love our neighbors.
Yep.
Well,
that sounds easy to do, and it's sometimes almost impossible for some people, including me.
Nah.
It's so hard for me not to get caught up in tribalism. Especially with this cup of trembling in the world today.
Yeah, not my favorite of commands, but Jesus is right and I'm wrong, so I'm still trying.
Amen. Me too.
Right. Okay, so Matthias, Judea or Ethiopia? Boy, those are far away.
And I don't, Matthias isn't. Now, let me get this straight, and I may be wrong, but isn't Matthias the person that Peter picked to replace Judas? And so this would have been, when they're in the upper room.
Yeah, casted the lots for him.
Right. Yep. So, and I always got the sense that Peter jumped the gun. I'm not sure he did, but I mean, because I know he casted the lots for him and everything. But Jesus didn't tell him to pick another apostle.
No. Okay.
So I'm kind of, I'm a little bit sketchy on this one.
There had to be 12, right? But there ended up being 13.
Mm-hmm.
So just, let's go back to the beginning. When Israel was called, when they became a people, when the brothers of Jacob became tribes, there were 13, right?
Well, there were 12.
No, there were 13.
Well, there were 13.
Because Joseph was split in two.
Right, but Joseph was split in two, but when they became, the original descendants were 12, and then Joseph got a double portion.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then in this case, the original descendants were 12, and then there was one more. Like there's this overlapping, and that's a storytelling method.
Right.
Right. It's important, and decisions. So the high priest had in his ephod, he had the
Umi and the
the Urim and the Thummim.
Yeah.
And one of them was a divining tool. It was casting lots.
Right.
So they casted lots. I mean, what they did was in line with Torah.
Oh, I agree, and and I'm certain that they didn't just randomly roll the dice. I'm sure there was a lot of praying and discussing.
Yeah, I think it was like forth. A rule of 3 or 7 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You'd roll it and you'd
ask
the
this wasn't
question.
just some random.
It had to be supernatural.
I get that part.
It had to be supernatural. So I don't. My inclination is to say. These were Jewish people doing what Jewish people do based on the law because they lived according to the wisdom of Moses that we call the law, right? And Jesus said the wisdom of Moses is good.
Yeah.
So, I don't, we needed Matthias.
I think for me with Matthias, he comes late. He comes in Acts, and I'm I'm a new reader of all this stuff. I've read it all one time exactly, and he comes in so late. I don't have a historical laser beam on what I think about Judea or Ethiopia. Yeah, they're two different traditions, and I wouldn't be able to.
Wherever he died, he died. He was
right.
either stoned or beheaded.
Yep.
Just another testimony to the fact that Jesus was so important that even this man, Matthias, whatever his relationship was with Jesus. Now, Jesus had more than 12 disciples.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He had 70, and he had more than 70.
Yeah, and also as a 21st century person, I really think the women get short shift in all this. I believe that, he had some extremely powerful, think about the women at the tomb, for example.
Well, and here's the thing. Like, it's not that they get shorted, it's that the curse of the garden makes women of less importance than men.
Right.
It's a fallen world. Jesus came to restore
exactly
that unity.
And the fact that he picked them is what I'm saying. I mean, they don't get apostolic credit, but they were some of his most devout and loyal followers. It would have been a death
sentence to the way. If
and probably to the woman too for blasphemy.
Yeah. So. Unfortunately, in a male-dominated, cursed world that's fallen to the curse, where the weaker vessel is treated not as equal or greater, but as to be used.
Right, and so the interesting thing about that curse, it goes back to Genesis 3. Jesus is restoring the garden.
That's right.
And so, if you think about before the tree of knowledge of good and evil, before the serpent. Adam and Eve, there was no you'll attempt to lord it over your husband, but he'll dominate you sort of language. I mean, they were, she was the helper.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's very interesting to me.
Equals.
Yeah.
But separate functions.
Yeah.
Right?
And
just
both,
like God is equal.
Yep.
And have separate functions, right?
And I believe when the reproductive necessity to go out and,
be fruitful, multiply.
Yeah, I mean, in my developing theology, it seems to me that when we are no longer trapped in our fleshly bodies, our gender is not going to matter a hill of beans if we're followers. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, we are so much more than this body.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's Jesus showed us that. I mean, he rose from the dead. He appeared in rooms. He disappeared. He ate after he had.
And
come back.
There are more witnesses to the resurrected Jesus than there are to the stabbing of Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
That's fact.
And we hang all this stuff on Plato and Aristotle, and
which have very few copies. By the way,
well, that's what I'm saying. And I mean,
I
mean, they teach college courses. I mean, I've had a college course on philosophy where those people are, it's almost like reading a scientific journal with footnotes that and then you find out later on in life, well. We think we're right, and here's the reason, but there's not
because
all that
history
much.
is a soft science.
Yeah, very soft.
So here's the interesting thing about Jesus and his disciples, though. No matter what we do know, or no matter what we know, and I'm stuttering here. We know a lot. We don't know everything. That's what I'm trying to get at. But it doesn't matter, because what we do know is that. One, something happened in the first century that caused people like this, and all these people have been Jewish people, to go out into the world and tell them about it, even to the detriment that they could be murdered for it, and indeed were murdered for it.
Uh-huh.
So whatever that is, it was very different than just something run-of-the-mill.
Well, when you've walked with God in the flesh, and you've seen a man crucified and then resurrected and then walked with him again and talked with him.
You know what informs me, and really I'm trying to actually visualize and believe, is the transfiguration. Beings of light.
Yep.
That's what Jesus is.
Yep.
And those associated with him. Beings of light. Elijah and Moses were on the same mountain. These were once men.
Well, there's so many, even the non-believers, there's so many, like the near-death experiences. Think about the cliche in the United States. I don't know where it started, but there's an awful lot of testimony about people that their heart has stopped. And what do they all talk about? light.
Yeah.
It's all about, and I mean, if you look at the actual, the light of the world, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot comprehend it or overcome it. Light, if you think about a cigarette on the horizon of a dark sea, a flaring cigarette can be seen from the far horizon on a dark night in the ocean without a moon. You can literally see somebody light a cigarette at that range. One light.
Well, what's phenomenal about light is darkness is the absence of it, but light is something.
Yep.
It is literally existing. Darkness is just darkness.
Yep.
It's without light.
Goes back to the beginning, brother.
It goes back. It's fact.
Yep.
Okay, so last one.
Well, we didn't do Thaddeus, I think. I think we got Thaddeus to do up there. I don't believe we did him.
Oh, we skipped Thaddeus, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's another one of the ones that I know very little about. I know he was in the building trades. That's about all I know. And
killed in Syria or Mesopotamia. So he went, again, the Mesopotamia. Yep. Syria is between the two rivers. He was clubbed or killed by arrows. Yep. And last but not least, John, the son of Zebedee. So John is the true apostolic authority for starting churches and being an elder.
Yeah.
And the church did really well up until his death.
Yep.
Just like Joshua.
Yep.
Yep.
So he basically closed out the first century with his lifespan. I know he was very, very young when Jesus, called him. But, after John, you're looking at the second century, essentially, and that's when things get dicey.
And the only one to die a natural death.
Yep. Well, wasn't that Jesus' promise to him?
Well, that's what I was just about to get to, right? Like, another thing, another testament to Jesus is just phenomenal. I mean, beside being the God who saw Nathanael in his own body, like in a physical body, now he's also the prophet who said to Peter, what does it matter to you what I do?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And then John gets to live just like Jesus said, and John was past his very mother. He was to take care of Mary.
Yep.
Because Jesus loves people.
Yep.
And he needed witnesses, and he brought witnesses, and John the elder was the last witness. Now, he certainly did not have an easy life.
No. So we talked about it in a past episode. I think we were doing the epistles about they tried to kill him, and it had something to do with boiling him in oil, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he was
man, these guys, wow, they really answered the call, didn't they?
They really
golly.
Did. Yeah, so there we are. 14 individuals from the New Testament, and every single thing that was ever said in the New Testament that we ever believed to be true, we've seen lived out in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very convinced of this one thing. Jesus was the Son of God and the Son of Man, and he rose from the dead, and he fulfilled the Mosaic covenant, and he gave us the new covenant, and he's coming again, so prepare yourself.
Boy, I tell you what, here we are in 2026, and look at the world.
It's an odd place out there.
Man, I tell you, my personal opinion to the listener is everybody was created to be living when they're alive. If that makes any sense to you, what I'm trying to say is you were born for this. Whatever it is, whatever it is you think you're, there's a reason you're here. I hope you figure it out.
It's Jesus.
It is Jesus.
That's the reason you're here. Seek Jesus with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And this he left you, a new commandment, that you would give yourself up as he gave himself up. So love your neighbors. Don't judge people. Stop saying Jewish people are bad. Stop saying liberals are bad. Stop saying conservatives are bad. Start just living for Jesus. Detach yourself from this world. Quit focusing on it and start focusing on the God who rose from the dead, because the day is coming. Mark my words. The day is coming when the king will return. And when he returns, he brings his judgment or his rewards with him. And it's your duty as an individual to lead the people around you either to him or, God forbid, away from him. And you will answer for either.
Eat of the tree of life and not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
That's right. He rose from the dead, and he's looking to save you because he loves you. We love you. We're thankful for you. We hope that you got something out of this. We certainly have. It's been an interesting study. There's going to be resources in the notes. Please feel free to reach out to us at modernmindancientbook.org. That's the website. Click around, find some things. All the resources are there. We are where podcasts are streaming And on YouTube, there's quite a bit, actually, more information on there, videos and that sort of thing. We also launched a VR chat kind of recording thing, so we're in virtual reality now. We'll get some stuff set up there, and we'll build a community as well. Chip, I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Hey, man, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me here,
You're
buddy.
a wonderful part of this ministry, and we pray the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and bring you peace. Thank you, and bye-bye.
God bless you all.